What are you saying, geezers? It's Spessy here. Today we are looking at the worst cards in Marvel Snap. I'm going to be proposing some balance changes to these cards, and tomorrow we're looking at the most powerful cards, and I'm going to be proposing a bunch of nerfs. So make sure you subscribed for that video. The Watcher up first, 1 energy, 2 stats. Once this is in your hand, you can see the unrevealed locations. This card is absolutely terrible, really bad. No reason to play it. However, if we change its ability slightly, it becomes an incredibly interesting card. If this is in your hand or deck, you can see the unrevealed locations. Do you think that would be too powerful? I personally think it fits the theme of the card very well. The character is always watching, but you don't know he's there. If he's in your deck, then surely he should be watching. Come on. Orca up next. We also have Namour included here. These cards just need some more points. They just aren't good enough. Orca plays for 14 points for 6 stats if it's the only card in that location. You can get more stats there with Mr. Fantastic, with Namour, with Claw rather. Nah. Make it 16 stats total, increase its base power to 10, and increase its ongoing ability to +6. Similar with Namour, give it a point in its power to 6, and give the ability an extra point to 6 as well, so it will play for 12 stats. Currently Namour, one of the worst cards in the game. Crystal, also terrible. Lots of people thought this card would be good with Zabu. It wasn't. It needs more power. I think her ability is somewhat interesting. I think 6 stats would be a decent starting point. Maybe more, to be honest. Maybe 7 stats. I guess 7 stats might be a little bit too good, but 6 stats would certainly be a good start. 5 would not be enough. Mantis, the only Guardian of the Galaxy who does not get a point buff when you get the prediction right. I love that for her. I think that's very cool. Unfortunately, she's pretty bad. The risk reward for this card is just not quite worth it. It is worth mentioning, if you do get the prediction right, this card is just a better version than Cable. It's doing a very similar thing, stealing an opponent's card and giving it to yourself. But it's not seeing any play. So, yeah. Dagger up next. Dagger is a card I would love to love, but it never makes the cut in movement decks. And I play a lot of movement decks. The big problem with this card in particular is you can't play Doctor Strange onto it very well because it's low power. There's going to be higher cards. Cloak can be okay with it, of course. Iron Fist can be okay with it, but there's lots of other cards like Human Torch, Vulture, Multiple Man, which you want to be using your Iron Fist on. So it's only really Cloak and Heimdall. And what often happens with movement decks is you don't play Heimdall. And therefore, if you're not playing Heimdall, Dagger is often playing for 1 point for 2 energy. So that is really bad. I think she just needs to get a little bit of a buff to her starting points, make her 2 stats. I think it would be pretty reasonable. We have Falcon up next. Falcon is 3 stats for 2. On reveal, return your 1-cost card to your hand. I think he can go to 4 stats. We have Cloak also at 2 energy and 4 stats. And that has a big upside of having the movement, and it doesn't see that much play in just generic mid-rangey decks. I don't think it's too dangerous, therefore making Falcon 4 stats for 2. One problem that Falcon has is that the cards he synergizes with a lot have been nerfed. We had Collector used to be buffing by 2 for every time you returned a cost to hand, and Bishop used to be 3 base power, I believe. Both those cards have been nerfed, therefore Falcon needs a buff. The Collector. Not so sure this is one of the worst cards in Snap, but I do think he could get an extra point. I think he could start at 2 stats, and it would be a pretty reasonable card. Collector was completely busted in beta. Again, it used to be 0 stats and buff by 2 whenever you add something to your hand. I think making Collector start at 2, similar to Craven, would be pretty reasonable. Ronan The Accuser next. Ronan is pretty powerful, but I think he could be given a little bit of help, either in some of the synergy cards he has, just having more ways of putting cards in your opponent's hand. But I also think, compared to the Dinosaur, he could just get an extra point. Maybe just start at 4 power. Nakia up next. Nakia has just been buffed, and this card is still super janky. I really just don't like the feeling of the ability. So in Marvel Snap, there's no direct way of targeting cards, so that's a problem. But one way you could target with her is by her buffing the lowest cost cards in your hand. This would have some nice synergy with Swarm and potentially Multiple Man as well, which is 2 cards you would love to be able to buff up in hand. Of course, though, an issue with that is you wouldn't be able to buff Black Panther up, which in terms of lore is a bit sad. You could also make Nakia buff your whole hand by 1, something like that. She used to buff your whole hand by 2 in beta and she was busted, so Nakia, they've been reworking a lot. She's still not it, in my opinion. It feels really, really horrible to play this. Just you have no control over what cards are getting buffed, really, and it feels very, very unpleasant to play. Moon Knight up next. Moon Knight, I want to see it 2 energy. This is a big one for me. You could probably keep it at 3 power, honestly. Maybe you put it to 2 power. But the problem with Moon Knight is there's so much competition for that 3 energy slot in discard decks. You have Gambit, Swordmaster, Lady Sif. Moon Knight is kind of the bottom of the pile there, right? So having an extra option at 2 would be nice. Lady Sif used to cost 2. So Moon Knight dropping down to 2 sounds like a pretty reasonable option. Clean Wing, of course, is an option at 2, but they're doing pretty different things. So yeah, that would be cool. Rhino up next, I think can just go to 4 power. Significantly worse than Storm, and quite a bit worse than Scarlet Witch as well. Scarlet Witch is 2 energy, 3 stats. So I think Rhino going 3 energy, 4 stats would be more than reasonable. Kingpin, I love this card. I think he can keep his stats, keep his energy. What I would like to see with Kingpin is him not being able to kill your own things. Because you honestly just get countered so often playing a Kingpin of your own when your opponent arrows your stuff into your Kingpin. It is painful. The other thing that would open up is the ability to play Kingpin in movement decks so that you would have more synergy with things like Kraven. You could still play Heimdall in a Kingpin deck. Right now you can't do that. So that would be pretty cool. The Thing, I would like to see go to 7 stats. The card is absolute hot garbage, one of the worst in the game. I know it's a starter card, but it's still really bad at 7 stats, I think. Maybe it's not that bad, though. It could maybe see some play. Right now, I see none. White Tiger, another one which isn't terrible. But I do think there is a case to be made for White Tiger's base power going to 2, or the Tiger that spawns going to 8. Just a point I think would be pretty fair. Nick Fury, I think, could just go to 8 power. It's pretty bad. Pretty simple. We have Black Bolt next. Black Bolt's a tricky one. One thing I would like to see happen with Black Bolt is it have some synergy with Morbius. We pitched around the idea in my Twitch stream earlier of it discarding the lowest card for both players, so it helps your Morbius, but then it's like a Moon Knight. One thing that I liked the idea of that chat suggested is it discarding the highest power card in your opponent's hand. This makes it somewhat similar to Leech as a way of countering cards like Leader, but it's not countering the whole hand, but it's more power. I think that sounds pretty interesting and would be a nice change to Black Bolt. One of the worst cards currently. Helicarrier, I do like this card. I have an issue with not its ability, well, not its power or energy costs, and I like its ability of adding cards to your hand when you discard it. I would just love to see something happen with these cards. Either they're a set cost, like you get 1 4 cost, 1 5 cost, 1 6 cost. That would be interesting. Someone in chat suggested that every card that you get from this could have its energy cost reduced by 1. I think that sounds really cool. So let's say you get a Hulk off the Helicarrier, it would then cost 5. Maybe that's too powerful, but bear in mind you're not going to hit Hulk very often, right? A lot of the time you're going to be hitting like 1 cost cards and things like that. Maybe that would be too powerful. I could definitely see that happening. But just some kind of control over the cards that are added to your hand, rather than complete random jank, having something in there would be cool. Finally, last but certainly not least, Heimdall. One person in chat suggested a very cool idea, which is lowering his power, but Heimdall buffs every card he moves. I do think, though, that would maybe prove to not be great. While it would be nice for cards like Multiple Man and Human Torch, which benefit from having extra power, one problem movement decks have a lot of the time is winning the right location, because you're moving everything from right to left. So I think giving Heimdall an extra point would be more than reasonable. They're all the ideas I have of the worst cards in the game. Is there any I missed that you think that I should have talked about? Any cards I didn't touch on? Let me know. Give the video a like if you watched it this far, and make sure you're subscribed for more Snap content. See you soon.